We've reached the end of this 6-week Mooc. Thank you so much for watching. In this video, we're going to offer some reflections on some of the things that we've covered. In Module 1, we focused on the policy analysis task of problem diagnosis. We looked at baseline conditions in developing countries in the water and sanitation sector, and we asked the question of what's going on now. And then we looked at the dynamic baseline to see where status quo conditions are headed. In Module 2, we're going to be looking at policy interventions, and we're going to try to answer the question, what works and what should be done?
So to recap, in the 6 weeks of this Mooc, we started off in week 1 looking at some basic water facts and infrastructure coverage for water and sanitation services around the world. Then in week 2, we looked at private water markets and also the issue of corruption in the water sector. In week 3, we looked at some supply-side issues by looking at technologies and their associated costs. Then in week 4, we looked at household water demand behaviour. And in week 5, we looked at 2 topics. Firstly, health and non-health outcomes. And secondly, climate change and its impacts on health and its impacts on the activities of water utilities. And then in week 6, we looked at water development paths and some of the history of the UK water system. So Dale, what do you think are the takeaway messages from this Mooc?
Well, I'd say one thing is that there are good and bad things going on in the dynamic baseline. The good things are that economic growth is increasing coverage around the world, and water and sanitation's problems are going to be largely solved in many cities soon. On the other hand, we've got climate change coming with some adverse effects on health and impacts on water utilities. And of course, another good thing is that household mortality, children's mortality rates are falling. So that's great news. I guess the other thing that I would emphasize is how uncertain status quo conditions are. I mean, we spent the 6 weeks of this Mooc studying status quo baseline conditions, and one of the takeaway messages in my mind is that it's really hard to figure out what's going on in a lot of places. We don't have good burden of disease or baseline incidence for diarrhea in many places. We don't have good cost data in many places. Water problems are local, and it's just not possible to get all the information that we need to understand water problems.
So it's from a research point of view, it's challenging to get the data. It's expensive to get it, and then even when you've got it, it might only apply to a local area, and you have to understand how local the conditions are. And
yeah, I think we need more research, but we also need to make decisions. I don't think we can say we can't act until we get more data. I mean, I think that we have the data we need to make a lot of the important decisions. It's just that we have to do it in the face of uncertainty. We have to be aware of the uncertainty. And I guess the other thing that I would say is, in my mind, is a takeaway message is this basic puzzle that we have. Households want piped water supplies, sewer systems, but they can't afford them. And we have these other technologies, these non-pipe solutions, that are cheap and effective, but demand for them is so low. So that's something we're going to really have to deal with as we move ahead to the second module in terms of policy interventions. We really have a puzzle here in terms of how to deal with this situation of affordability and low demand for non-pipe systems.
And I guess the research to find out, why there's these strange puzzles around demand. It's not the same kind of research to find that out as it is to just get basic coverage information or some of the cost information. It's a different, there's lots of different things that you need to find out when you're looking at this water and sanitation situation.
Well, I think that's been one of the lessons of the course, is that we need inputs from all these different disciplines. It's sort of like pieces of a puzzle. We need public health information, engineering information, economic information, finance information, sociological information, anthropological information. We need to put all this together to try to solve these problems. There's no one discipline that can really do it for us.
Now that we've reached the end of the Mooc, we'd be very interested to hear from you on the discussion forums about the questions that the material we've covered has raised for you and how it might have affected your work.
And we'd like to thank the University of Manchester and the Manchester Business School for their help in putting this Mooc together. We'd like to thank our team here at the production facilities. And we'd like to thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in the next half of the course.